Check 1 2. There it is. I got it on YouTube. Mike 11. Check 1 2. That's
Hello.
questions today as today?
Yeah, here, I'll give it to you.
Don't go here.
No, no, it's right here. Right here. I have no issue.
See where,
Most of my new questions, which I already have it from the other day, were regarding, what the days will look like.
yeah,
What the
which,
offers are gonna look like.
which,
Right,
it's the 22nd of July. I said to Brett earlier today, I said, we really won't know until the Wednesday after Labor Day. The first day of school is when we're really gonna know. And by the end of the day, that'll have changed. Thank you. I mean, it's so like Baltimore today said they're not going to.
Really?
Baltimore City. So, yeah. Yeah, right now, in the bubble.
Can you just ask Tony if he invited him? If he invited him?
Virginia.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Right, the doctor is in. Good evening, everybody. This is Brett Provenzano here from the Fairport Central School District. Thank you very much for coming to our second town meeting on our school reopening. We appreciate everybody's participation into this very, very important conversation. I have a panel here with me today. Again, this is sponsored and brought to you by our PTA, our Fairport PTA. Behind any or most of our great experiences, we have very passionate families who are part of our schools, and we're happy to be having this conversation with members of our PTA. I'm going to ask representatives here tonight to share who they are and their title. We'll start with our Zoom guest. We have front and center, Dr. Cook.
Hi, I'm Steve Cook. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics at the Golisano Children's Hospital, and I also serve as a medical director in New York State Department of Health in Albany.
Thank you once again for sharing the evening with us. And I know Joyce Kostek, who's been a board member for, I believe, 18 years, newly or re-elected, her incumbent seat. I know she's looking forward to serving the next 3 years. She is listening in via Facebook Live, I believe, and to my left.
Tim Sliz, I'm the vice president of the school board. I'm a 30-year retired teacher from JP. I also sit on the village board, and some questions that might pertain to that I could answer as well.
Definitely overlapping for sure. To my left behind me, I have Sarah Driscoll, who is our K-5 parent representative.
Yes, my name is Sarah, and I will be representing K through 5 and continuing on questions that I received from all the parents. So thank you for sending those in.
Thank you very much. And I have Miss Kelly Hodge to my right, who represents the 612 parent group for our PTA.
Hi, Kelly Hodge. I know I've gotten a lot of questions over the last couple of days, and hopefully we can get to a lot of those here tonight. And thanks for being here.
And to my back corner, I have Mr. Aaron Smith, who is our director of B&G. Why don't you say hello, Mr.
Well,
Smith?
like Mr. Provenzano said, Aaron Smith, Director of Buildings and Grounds, fairly new to Fairport, but been in school facilities management for about 12 years now.
And way over here in the corner, socially distanced, we have a number of administrators here tonight who we may be calling out of the proverbial bullpen to share their thoughts and expertise, because I do know that they have tremendous insights into this process and passions around, how we transition back to school. So we look forward to sharing this evening with you. We plan on being with you here for the next hour and a half to review our process, to reiterate very important ideas, to take questions, and again, to continue to learn from each other. In front of me, there is a screen here that I'm going to make sure I'm clicking the right screen. This is not moving here. My screen is locked. The mouse is, okay, there it is. Very good. I would like to emphasize that the amount of questions, and they're all very justified, is quite large. Please don't hesitate to contact us at this information gathering site. Or if you go right to our Fairport website, there is a homepage banner. It's in yellow. You just click on that banner where it says click here. So we can gather your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them in a frequently asked question document as we move forward. Again, this page is important because in this time frame, we've learned that not all questions can be addressed, although we do our best to monitor the screen and take the questions that you've been sharing with your PTA reps. Sometimes time will fall short. You'll see that I put in front of you here a puzzle. And this is exactly what it looks like right now, and sometimes when you do a puzzle, I know we did many puzzles over the quarantine, it gets pretty frustrating or overwhelming, or you're not sure which way to go. But over time, that puzzle starts to make sense. And, the only way to solve that puzzle, and at least in my family, was there was a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, a lot of trying different things. And sometimes you think you had a piece or a section all set, and then something happens, like the dog comes by and knocks it over, or you have to try and start again. So, that metaphor really spoke to me clearly this morning. And it's worth repeating that throughout this entire process, we've said there are 5 fundamentals guiding our return back to school. We're going to use guidance and recommended best practices. And I was talking to Mr. Sliz this afternoon, and those are ever-changing, right? I mean, what we know today sometimes changes the very next day and moment to moment. But, we are using the guidance from our experts. We're surrounded by a great network of professionals. Dr. Cook being from, again, the local area. He's also connected to the New York State Department of Health and the Monroe County Department of Health. We've been fortunate enough to stay close to Dr. Mendoza throughout this process. The CDC has given us guidelines, and of course, the governor's expectations and the state education department are guidance that we need to follow, that we must follow. It's really not a voting process when it comes to the guidance, especially when it comes to the greater health and well-being of our greater community. Those ideals will and cannot be compromised. And I know it's something that our Board of Education adheres to as well. We are always trying to seek feedback and communicate and learn. And sometimes it's not always as clear as we want it to be because, of this puzzle that we're living in and how things are changing rapidly. But be assured that we're committed to learning our way through this, and we're not afraid to monitor and adjust as we move along. But I also need to say that we understand that the social emotional needs of our students and our staff is of utmost priority. And the academic needs and the curriculum management and ed programming components are fundamental to our return. We need to make sure that what's happening in our schools is implemented with great fidelity, and there's consistency in all of our schools. So no matter what school you go to, from JP to Martha Brown to, Dudley to JA and Brooks Hill in Northside, that logistically speaking, there's levels of coherence, and we're following the same plan, whether it's relative to the social emotional needs, which we all know hold to be true and paramount and at the forefront of everything we do, and the academic curriculum management components of our transition. There's many logistics, from PPE to new ways of thinking about distancing and masking and coming to school with a new frame of reference that needs to be operationalized. So these 5 fundamentals have been a part of what we've been trying to do here in our schools, and we'll continue to use these as we go through our process. We've had a number of surveys and thought exchanges, and up here, again, I'm not going to read through every single one of them, but we've asked questions along the way. We're very interested to understand your perceptions. Again, it's not always in the interest of voting on what scenario or what's the best way people think things should be done, you know, it's about just getting a feeling, tone, and perceptions. The perception survey that we recently administered will be made available to the public in full scale, in final result form tomorrow for those who are interested in seeing what the perceptions of the community are relative to the survey that we just asked community members to complete. There's been a number of town hall meetings. Again, working through COVID and the quarantine, we found a new way to communicate with our community at a greater exponential fashion, and we're excited to continue to learn and grow as we talk about the good news of our district and as we learn our way through our return back to school. Our timeline is holding true. This last week, we received guidance, 145 pages worth of guidance from the State Education Department based upon the governor's guidance. I'm trying to make sense of that, working with administrators, breaking up this 145-page document up into groups, because on July 31st, we need to have a plan for our reentry analyzed, revised, and then completed and submitted to the State Education Department. Again, not a lot of time. Again, not a lot of opportunities to have a long, drawn-out process with the new guidance in our hands. But we're doing our best, and we feel confident that we're going to put it all together and bring this puzzle piece by piece into a clear picture. The week of August 3rd to the 21st, it continues to be a very important time frame where we will continue to listen and work and collaborate with our staff. We have a whole group of staff members who are very interested in helping problem solve and put together the best plan for our students and families. I'm looking forward to getting engaged and completely invested into that work as we move into next week. The governor will have a lot to say as we transition. We'll be looking at the transmission rate. If the transmission rate is less than 5%, schools will reopen under the given guidance using a 14-day average. However, we have seen spikes. We have seen new states listed on the travel ban over the past several days. If it's at 9% or greater, we will need to transition to a digital learning platform using a 7-day average. Again, these are just points of interest that will guide our process moving forward. Staff work groups, again, will refine and confirm details with the Board of Education and the oversight team. Of course, making sure that we're doing the best we can, providing guidance, asking questions, so we have the best plan for our students. Again, here's the guidance, 145 pages. This was a guidance document that was sent out Monday, I believe, and our reentry. It speaks about face coverings. It speaks about distancing. It speaks about when face coverings should be worn, where they should be worn. We also know that interpretations and things can change in these guidance documents. So we're watching that very closely as we continue to plan for our return. It talks about our cleaning and disinfection protocols and expectations. It speaks to families and their commitment and our commitment as a school district. It speaks to if there is a case of COVID, what our protocols should follow as we re-enter our schools. Here are the number of people that, again, we will be finalizing our plans with. I know the Board of Education will be highly involved. We have board members on this panel here, as well as representatives that we met with today. We met with 15 students today, incredible students, insightful students, sharing their thoughts and expectations for their return. They're excited to come back. It's amazing the level of maturity and the range of students that we were able to interact with, and we look forward to continuing to learn with them and sharing sharing from their perspective. So we have 4 plans. The first plan is we are back in school for complete instruction. Right? We hope and would love to be living in this world, using all of our space possible, making sure that classrooms, gyms, cafeterias, libraries, music and art rooms are used differently. However, given the guidance that we received, using masking and physical distancing, this option is not feasible at this time. Mind you, we are obligated to complete 3 plans, all right? And we will be able to pivot in between any one of these plans at any point in time. We hope to be here at some point. If there is a vaccine in the near future, this plan would give us a pathway to bringing all of our students back under masking, physical distancing requirements. There's a hybrid plan. We call this option number 2, and it's a complete hybrid option K-12. Now, again, there's many ways to go at this, and we're trying to take in all the information that we have at this time, and the guidance does change. Mr. Sliz continually reminds me, as we move forward over the next few days into a week or two, the hybrid may change, but this is how we're seeing it right now. There'll be cohorts meeting in person. The purpose of the hybrid is to decrease the density in our buildings, and it allows us to adhere to the safety, health, the health and safety guidelines the district is considering. And I'm going to ask, Mr. Clark and Mrs. Moretter to come forward, to come by a mic right here. And, you guys are probably sick of hearing my voice, but I know that they could bring some fresh energy to the conversation too, to speak about, this particular hybrid model. So we'll stay up. Yep. We have Mrs. Moretter. Since we're going K-5, then we'll go 6-12, and take the mic. Have fun with it.
All right, sounds good, Brett. Thanks for the opportunity. So I think on behalf of all of us, option 1 is certainly what we wish we were working towards, and because of the guidelines, we know that's not feasible at this time. So the hybrid model, we feel, gives us the best opportunity to get students into the buildings, which is incredibly important to us. And as Brett is sharing on this slide right now, there's a few options for how the cohort could look. But basically, students would be in person 2 days a week in school, full days. We would reduce the density by having half of the students in the classroom. So at the elementary level, that would look like approximately 12 students per class. It would be our goal on those days to replicate a school day as normal as possible, providing specials to our students. We know we need to provide opportunities for movement. We know there has to be time for mass breaks. We are looking across all 4 of our elementary buildings to utilize as many of the spaces as possible, and many parents have commented about using gyms and using outdoor spaces, and those are all options that we are working through. We're considering, what lunch would look like and how we can reduce the density in the cafeteria. We know lunch can't look like it always has looked in an elementary building, but using a combination of our lunch space in classrooms would be our goal as well. And then for the days that students are not in school, providing structure for our students that are at home. There is a regulation where we need to take attendance daily, and we would want to provide meaningful structure and activities for students to do on the days that they aren't in school.
I think that's important to recognize that, we would love to see our children every single day, and we wrestled, right? And we've problem solved, and, Apollo 13, many different scenarios, and given the guidance and, the need for us to continue to develop a plan, this is, where we're landing. But that day when students are not in, I know that we still need to continue to collaborate with our teachers, but, we have ideas about that. I know you started to mention that, but just,
Sure. We heard loud and clear from our parent community as well as feedback from our staff that we want virtual instruction in the fall to look different. And we're going to be working together, like I said, to provide meaningful instruction for students at home. I know last night, Brett, you had mentioned the idea of a flipped classroom. That's really where students would watch videos or recorded lessons at home, and then the days that they are in school, that time is really spent with meaningful conversation. We know that we want opportunities for students to submit work, for feedback to happen from our teachers to our students. So those are all things that we're working on right now for those virtual days, again, with the goal of making it meaningful for our students.
as meaningful as possible when
Sure.
you're in a virtual environment. And again, checking in with the students, whether it's in the beginning of the day and or the end of the day, using your format in the most fluid way, so we can always have an eye on them. Thank you, Ms. Murder. Why don't you stick around, because, once you get going on the mic, sometimes it's hard to stop, trust me. I'm going to ask Mr. Grow to my left. He's the principal at Joanna Perrin Middle School, and I know he works closely with Mr. Dunn, so it's a combined message of what their hopes are in a hybrid model for 6-8.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, Aaron said it really well. We're trying to make sure those days when we don't have kids in the building as meaningful as possible through work. And our staff is already working together on plans for that, how it's going to look, what they're going to do, and how to make sure the kids enjoy that experience as much as they can. We're very excited to have any chance to get them in the building, as everybody is in the district. And we want to start working on our things. Mr. Dunn and I were talking today about trying to get our incoming sixth graders, find a way for them this summer to come visit, since they missed out on that opportunity last year because of when we closed down, they didn't get a chance to come into the buildings to visit and see us and get to see some of the teachers and how we operate. But we're working on that. And I do want to say thanks not only to our parents, Kelly and Sarah, for being here, but like our staff is, their summer hasn't started like it usually has either. They're working hard to develop these things too, because they're excited for the kids to come back. So the plans are going nonstop, and we'll be ready for whichever model, hopefully the best scenarios possible, but we'll be ready for all of them.
Thank you. And again, as in the same fashion, being prepared and organized, not only when the students are there, but having a framework that engages middle school students to the best of your ability when they are home.
And that's what we're working on mostly right now too, to make sure that that home instruction part is going to go well, just like it would when they're in school.
Thank you. And Mr. Robert Clark, who is the principal of Fairport High School, he'll be speaking on behalf of the secondary 912.
So I think the original question was, what are our hopes for a hybrid model? And for the high school, the complexity for us is really in the overall density of the building. On a normal day in a traditional schedule, we would have roughly 1,500 students and approximately 200 adults in the building. So the hybrid schedule is really the only option for us to be able to decrease density in a meaningful way. The issues that we have around that and that we're working on in terms of those challenges and using extra space is any time that we're in passing or we're in unstructured settings like a lunch or maybe a little bit more of a large setting like PE or orchestra and chorus and those kind of things. So we've got a lot of complexity with that and the individuality of our schedules, knowing that our students with 87 different electives, it's very hard for us to cohort them in small groups. So we're looking to overall in this schedule decrease the density by roughly half of the kids not coming into the building. It was really insightful today. We had 15 students or so meeting earlier today with Mr. Provenzano and getting some insight from them. And I think for us, the number one goal in a hybrid schedule versus an all virtual is the social, emotional well-being of our students. Many of our students expressed a lack of motivation in a completely virtual schedule and hoping to have those meaningful relationships with teachers, which will be a little bit more of a challenge, and that we don't have, like last year we had 20 or so weeks to build those relationships with students before they went out. So it's really, we're going to have to make a concerted effort to build relationships early on in the school year so our students know who they can count on. Mr. Groh talked a little bit about, and I think Ms. Moretter talked about increased accountability in terms of attendance and engagement And we're working really hard to establish, different virtual protocols, which are less focused in a reactive way on dealing with COVID and more focused on really creating a learning environment that benefits our kids when they're in class, and then what the direction is for them out of class. And that starts with different expectations around grades and accountability and attendance and being virtually present in the meetings that they're in. So a lot of work to do, and we're really excited about the opportunity to come back and have our students as much as possible in a safe way.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And I'm sure, again, please continue to stay up here, and the more voices here, the better it would be for everybody to hear from our school leaders as well. The next piece is the virtual option that we've been talking about. And I know that this poses more questions than answers at this time. This slide right here, or this concept right here, inspired the idea of the puzzle. and this hybrid, or excuse me, this online activity or online virtual instruction piece per family choice may or may not be a Fairport teacher. We, at this time, do not have any way, at this time, on July 22nd, thank you very much, on July 22nd, do not know or have the accurate numbers to understand which teachers would be able to teach full-time on online classes for those unable to return, all right? We are working with BOCES. It's a collaborative effort. There are 22 BOCES schools in our region. We will be coordinating with multiple districts. So this is not just a Fairport problem. This is a Monroe County challenge. The pieces of the puzzle everybody is owning. We're talking frequently, if not daily, multiple times a day. So it's something that it's reassuring that, we have good partners, but we have many moving parts to this. We know that it will be a credit-bearing option. We cannot guarantee access to Fairport's diverse elective offerings. We won't know to what extent what we will be able to offer based upon an assessment of the availability of Fairport staffing, and then we need to align it to our students' need. All right? We are, again, coordinating instruction with multiple districts throughout Monroe County, so that's why it appears to be fuzzy. Not appears, it is fuzzy. And I understand that it's unsettling for many, and please know that this is something that we're working on diligently as we speak within our own Fairport district. And I know that there'll probably be more questions to this as we move along, too. The fourth option will be in the event of a closure. Our students will be part of an experience with improved norms and expectations. We've spent a lot of time reframing and developing our online capacity. If we should all need to go online, students will be able to join their classes daily. They will have a revised online schedule that aligns with their current schedule. They will be able to interact with a consistent platform via Google Classroom. All of our teachers will be having a Google Classroom, communicating with their students via Google Classroom as well. They'll have daily attendance requirements, and will be expected to complete assignments to be graded. And again, this is a new and improved version of what we experienced over the spring as we transition to an online platform. Again, this is if we are all going to a full online schedule. So with that in mind, we are going to need information, all right? And I spoke to this yesterday about the importance of when we reach out to the community in the very near future, we will ask families if their children will walk to school, ride the school bus, or if they will drive their children to and from school. This information will help us as we navigate the transportation scenarios that we need to consider when bringing students back to school. On the bus, students will be expected to be wearing masks and remain distanced, one student to a seat. We'll be looking to see who's interested or in the in-person or distance learning as we move forward. We will have families opt to have their children participate in the full distance learning option in place of the hybrid model. And I understand that there's some frustration around that because there's not clarity. I do just want to emphasize there are many moving parts to it, but we will be able to create an online experience. It will be standards-based. We will be driven by New York State curriculum. The electives may not be as robust as a Fairport student experiencing a hybrid or even an online version if we all had to go online in the classes that they're currently taking. So I think that we have a number of questions, and we'll start right off the bat. I think last night we fell a little short with the secondary. Do you want to start again? Yep.
Okay, so I guess I'll just run down what I had given you. So as far as what school days, it should be, yep, is it not? Yeah. As far as school days, has it ever been a consideration? I know a lot of families were wondering, grouping kids Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, as opposed to the Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, just to keep kids together.
I'll let the principals take that one.
Sure. There's been a lot of conversation around what is the best way to cohort students. And I think, as Brett had shared on his slide, that Wednesday will definitely be a virtual day for all elementary and secondary students. And what we've really discussed is the biggest con to the going 2 days is that we wouldn't really see the kids for 5 days. So it would be 2 days in person, Wednesdays virtual, and then students in that Monday, Tuesday cohort, they're not coming back into the building until 5 days has passed. And just concerns about connections, socialization, retention of material. So those have been some of the things that we've discussed and really working out what is the best hybrid for us to land on in terms of the combination of days.
Okay, and I think the only, just to back into that, the only consideration was the cleaning aspect, keeping the kids grouped. I think that was one of the big concerns with grouping them 2 days together.
So I think that's a fair question, and it does have a little appeal to it. And I'm going to ask Mr. Smith to talk about, students are going to leave the building, staff is going to leave the building, we're going to clean the building, right? So even though people would expect like a deep clean, I think our expectation is that we are deeply cleaning the building every night.
Not only is that the expectation, that is the mandate, that's the requirement. It is not an option. It seems like a good idea, to save resources, but the reality is, we can't soundly guarantee that each kid only touches the same things tomorrow that they touch today. So therefore, we need to quote unquote, deep clean every space, every single day.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there was a question also about explaining what the off days or home days would be and what the expectations would be for kids during those days.
That's what we're working on right now with the teachers. That's what I mean. We want to make sure there's meaningful as a day in school, to make sure there's work being done, expectations. As Mr. Clark said before, there's going to be different expectations this year for that online version of work for kids. And we'll be explaining that to parents, where to check the work, how to see what's being done, and what the expectation is for kids on day-to-day. And that's why that Google Classroom for everybody is going to come into play really well. So it can kind of be an easy form for parents to see where the work is, what the kids need to do, and what's expected of them on those days. But that plan is just, it's very fluid right now, just as we're exploring all our options for this. But that's a goal of ours, all of ours, is to make sure those days are meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just, if I could add, just again, from the high school perspective, Pat's absolutely right. Right now is very formative for us. We really, again, this is done so far at an administrative level, and we really need to work with our teacher leaders and departmentally to norm expectations around that. and making sure that classes have relatively equal experiences across the board, across grade levels. And so we need to put some time in place for our teachers to plan effectively. There will absolutely be independent work, and the format of that is going to depend, again, on the teachers and the delivery model. But as Mr. Provenzano said earlier, different expectations. We will have every teacher on Google Classroom, which is not the case in the spring. And so using that as a common platform for delivering lessons, whether they be flipped or not, we'll definitely have independent work for them to do. And again, as I talked to the students today, that was something that they were excited about.
Which was pleasantly surprising.
Yes, it was very pleasantly surprising. They were asking for some structure, and they were asking for the normalcy across the board in the platform, and excited to hear that that was going to be present.
I also understand that it's incredibly important that we solidify these plans, and, there needs to be a definitive statement from the district stating that this will be the actual hybrid model, right? And I do know that we are coordinating with the other districts throughout the county, and we're trying to all work succinctly. Majority of these districts are also, going to be having similar conversations. And it looks like Wednesday will be a day that will be our virtual day, where we will, continue to connect with kids, but also have meaningful planning so we can continue with developing platforms. So hopefully by the end of next week, my goal is to communicate this definitively with the greater community. I know that that's a question out there.
Sorry, I'm just going to go right into the education part that it's been a repetitive theme in a lot of parents, an underlying theme. And I know that plans have not been solidified and things still need to be worked into. And it's just, I think it's the hope of some parents that these are just taken into consideration, I think at this point. That all kids will need some type of catch-up at the beginning of the year. Parents are worried about their kids being behind, and that everybody seems to be on the same page about that. And I think that's understood across the board. Different classes being handled differently. I know those will be, again, discussed in more detail as things go on. The biggest question, I think, is the virtual and hybrid question. And I guess the biggest question underlying is why choosing BOCES over maybe a different online established platform?
It's a matter of staffing. It's a matter of being able to direct staff and coordinate staff and understand, first of all, what the need may be, right? So that's why the puzzle, as we move along, will become a little bit more formed, and we'll be able to make sense of the different parts as we get more information from our staff, from families, from the BOCES community, to understand how we could put all these parts together. And again, as we move along, that information will become clear. If there's a medical need, or if there's a genuine need, or interest to stay in an online framework, this might be the right model for you. Trying to be very clear and transparent about the fact that there's ambiguity around it. Again, this is 4 or 5 days old, this guidance, but we do know that will be called to provide this service, and we'll be happy to provide it and grow and become better and do the best for our kids and our families. Mr. Clark?
I think I have an analogy that might help you understand why BOCES. I think that that's something that we recognize based on parent and student feedback. For example, in our meeting today, one of our students said, based on how I feel about the situation, I don't plan on attending until 2021. Very upfront about that based on, fears and family conditions and things like that. But a good analogy would be our BOCES run summer school. And we don't know until June what our student population will be. We don't know until June what courses they require. And so until we acquire that information, the hiring process for that, the staffing of that process is very, very difficult. It's a very last-minute process that we go through, really during the last week of Regents and then the week after that, all to start the second week in the summer. So I think that, the idea that every year we plan on having summer school is because we recognize there's going to be a need for students to catch up in terms of credits, et cetera. And in this regard, again, we're hearing our students and families say that none of these options work for me. And so it's knowing that we don't have that internal resource. We assume right now on the face of it that most of our staff will return. We don't just have staff laying around. We've just gone through a budget process and we budget for staffing accordingly based on what our students have signed up for. So we recognize that there's a need, and it's seeking our partners in BOCES and the rest of the county to say, do you have the same need? And they're saying yes, but no one knows to the degree that occurs, how many kids per district. And so BOCES is a wonderful partner in that regard, in that we participate for that reason, the same way that we participate with BOCES for other programs such as automotive, cosmetology and things like that, things that we can't offer independently, but we know there's an interest for our students. So I think that that's a good analogy for people to understand why BOCES, that's why they exist, to serve all of the districts in the county.
But saying that, and I agree with that, it's well stated, as we move along, we'll have greater understanding of what the actual needs are, and what our ability is to service those needs and be able to then plug that algorithm into the best scenario when we know that.
So just to piggyback on that, because I know it's going to be another question that I'm going to get, and it's already been a question, has it ever been an option to choose like an established online option, like a K-12 or a Khan Academy type of something that already exists, as opposed to a BOCES platform?
Again, having those be accredited and aligned to, New York State standards and expectations, those are things that we're not familiar with at this time. So we haven't been investigating those options. Those are good resources, those are good supplements that complement, but to say that that's an entire program, we haven't invested in that.
Thank you. Let's see, with the virtual and hybrid model, if a parent opts for the virtual model as opposed to the hybrid, are they locked in until December? If it truly isn't working out for a family?
If it's not working out with a family, we'll always work with families, but it is a long-term commitment, because as we're planning and getting organized, especially with the distancing and the spacing requirements, we will ask that we will revisit it until January. And that means like around October, November, we will be reaching out to families, those who have committed, and if they're not seeing that it's the right fit, then we will talk about transitioning them back in January as we move through the year. And that's just about a matter of planning, because, again, there's such restrictions that we're under. If all of a sudden we had an influx based upon an original plan, that could really impact the greater good as well. So we will obviously work with families, and we'll do our best to serve them, and we'll do that happily. But, we do need to have some parameters around it just so we could be organized and prepared for the greater good.
The next one would touch on homeschooling option, and if there would be any supports for the families who would choose this option, such as utilizing some of the district supplies, sharing online accounts, things like that.
There's a board policy, and, we'll follow the board policy. We do allow homeschool students to use textbooks, supplies that we have in stock for our students. As a rule, we would do that, but if we do not have supplies at hand, we don't purchase them. But if there's particular questions, I would have families reach out directly to my office. That's where homeschool is being managed. And like I said, I know that we've lent books out, and if there are supplies that are accessible and that are not being used, by all means.
The next question is for safety. Being that more children would possibly not be taking transportation and would be walking, is the district looking into possibly more crossing guards at bigger intersections
Mr. Sliz, I know that you're intimately, well, you have
That's part of my village
great knowledge,
job.
right? And
Um,
you're intimately involved with this.
School crossing guards are the responsibility of the local law enforcement agency. So in the village of Fairport, the Fairport Police Department, that is part of their annual budget. And we have budgeted for the regular crossing guards at the 250 Hulbert, as we have had, and also at the Potter Hulbert intersection. We don't have any crossing guards at Potter and West Church. We used to have at Balmer and Summit. And right now, we have not budgeted for any new crossing guards, but that is something that we can always go back and look at. However, we also have to realize that the resources in the village have been tapped severely because of the economic downturn, and we are anticipating about a $200,000 loss to sales tax revenue, which we don't have any way to make up. Our village tax has increased significantly this year because of the situation we're in economically, and right now we have not budgeted for that. But with some of the stimulus money that comes through, there may be some money in that for things such as crossing guards. But at this time, there are not, we are not planning to add any more, but that discussion is not off the table.
Thank you. And I know, Brett, you alluded to some of these yesterday, but could you just address the issue with extending learning spaces to outdoor spaces?
I'm going to have Mr. Smith speak to that, but I'll just couch it by saying that, yes, I mean, I do anticipate, students and staff to be outside, to enjoy nature, enjoy the scenes of being outside, be socially spaced outside. We have bleachers, we have places where students naturally will go on any day. I'm sure staff will take advantage of that. But as far as other components, Mr. Smith can speak to the tents and the
Yeah.
details that we've been studying.
I'm glad this came up because I'm watching the comments on Facebook, and there's a lot of that came up. We have researched it extensively, and I'll tag this in with the other question about using spaces in the community outside of the school district. Several challenges. The tents for safety reasons, schools are very safe places. We have all kinds of building code requirements that exceed just about any place that you'll ever go anywhere else. And to that point, we can't put up makeshift structures that we can confidently say are safe for students. So a tent has to have a building permit. It has to have certain wind ratings and snow loads beyond what you would normally put in your backyard. It has to be ADA compliant. We've costed it out, and it ranges from $10,000 a month to $75,000 a month, and that's enough space for 25 kids. And if money were no object, then we've created twice as many spaces, which means we need twice as many adults to manage and supervise and teach children, and we don't have that. So, I mean, it hasn't been for lack of effort in looking into those things. And it's just, the same thing goes for using spaces in the community. We have to make sure that the air filtration is at the same standard that we have to meet. We have to make sure that we clean and sanitize those spaces, which adds to the burden of the cleaning and the lack of people to manage those spaces.
Thank you.
Sorry. I guess this would be for you and Mr. Liz. There was a question that came across about families in need and who utilize the school as a primary food source, and how that would be handled, and if there are any other food programs for families in the district who now find themselves in this type of assistance, needing this type of assistance.
I'd ask Deborah Miles, our Director of Student Services, to take this question. Thank you, Mrs. Miles.
So we have not entirely landed on a solution for that, except that we are certainly considering, reducing the number of choices in the lunch line and making sure that we are supporting students when they're in school, but also contemplating and trying to come up with plans in terms similar to what we did March through June in terms of how we would feed families when they're at home. So setting up satellite places across the community where lunches could be picked up if they were needed. But we have to, continue to work through that and figure out what that looks like when you have half your students in school and half out, and with parents working and kids off at daycare. It's not as accessible to get to those community sites, so we would have to kind of map that out and figure that out. But we're certainly thinking about those families and making sure that we do what we can to support them.
I believe we served over 50,000 meals this past closure, and I know that, the hearts and the passions to make sure that that continues as we return will continue to burn bright. So thank you, Mrs. Miles. If there's students who are, or families who want to know about free and reduced lunch, how do we go about and do that, Mrs. Miles?
Certainly on the website, I believe in that COVID tab as well, there was a place that we posted frequently throughout the closure for parents to, especially with COVID and people going on unemployment and possibly losing jobs, that we posted the application for free and reduced lunch. So we would encourage any family who feels like they're in that position to complete the application. And, as soon as we get that and we determine the approval, we would let you know and make sure that, your family is taken care of.
Thank you.
Let's see. Can you just talk again, just briefly, because I know that there are still questions, maybe it wasn't clarified, that when exactly the district would have the concrete plan? I know you touched on this in the beginning, but when the specifics will be sent to families, so they know exactly what their options are, so they can make the informed decision, and when do they have to make that by?
I'm anticipating sharing information about the hybrid model that we eventually confirm. I gave a sneak peek into a scenario. I'd like to hold on to that scenario, but as Mr. Sliz has said, scenarios change based upon feedback that we get, and it is an ever-changing environment. But I am hoping by next week I can confirm that scenario, because I know childcare plans are on the balance here. I also shared this timeline. You'll see August 3rd through the 21st, we'll be listening and waiting for the governor's final decree on to what extent we come back. Will it be hybrid? Will it be digital? We know it'll be one of the two, okay? Hopefully our transmission rate, and maybe Dr. Cook can talk a little bit about that. That will give us some insights as to where we are now and what that could potentially project to be. No pressure. Your volume.
I should, committed the first sin of a Zoom call, talking while on mute. So actually I was trying to pull up our local data in terms of transmission rate, but if you look at the New York Forward webpage, it has the state broken down by the regions that are on the dashboard, and the transmission rates for opening and for closing that have been discussed are based on the region. And for us, that would be the 9-county Finger Lake region. Within that, there is.
Do you want to share? You want me to get out? Share?
Well, I'm trying to pull it up. So if I don't get it right now, we can pull it up a little later. But for the past few days, we've been right around 1%. 1% sounds good, but it's really important to understand that the concern is when you start getting community spread, 1 goes to 2 and 2 goes to 4, and that can be very fast. And then 4 goes to 8. So it's something that, again, it's based on a 14-day average. So to see it start to climb tells you that for the previous 10 or 12 days, it's been going up. So that's really a key indicator that we kind of all need to keep our eye on. But last I looked, our region has been, 0.9 to 1%, and most of the upstate area has been right around that.
Thank you. And between August 3rd and August 21st, we will be refining and confirming details and finalizing plans and communicating it to our greater community. And as we solidify within that time, we will be sharing accordingly. And that might mean a couple different announcements and breakpoints where we're able to share pertinent information. And as we go forward, I know just by reading the comments that there is high interest to learn more and understand what's happening with the online choice. And I'm sharing the information as best as I know it today. A week from now, I may know it a little bit better. And that's my goal, and that's been sort of the trajectory of this journey. I know that causes frustration, and there's nothing more frustrating to me as well. So I understand that, I hear that, and that's why it's a priority to work through those details.
Okay, I just have one more question as of right now, and then I'll give it over to Sarah so she has time. I know you addressed this a little bit last night, but webcams in the classroom, I know that there's a lot of issues surrounding that, and has it been looked at that it would be a possibility just to have the teachers versus the whole class?
You know, that's a conversation that I know that I was just talking to Mr. Devitt, our technology director, about that very conversation. Yes, it's about making sure that we have the right resources and inventory, and then putting it in the classrooms. And I know that we've been talking about how do you bring students in, and when do you bring students in at different times during their hybrid model. So we anticipate that to be a viable modality, without a doubt.
And the last one, and I'm just going to take this time just for a minute to just make a comment that I know that I got a lot of questions, and I know they are very specific as to courses and curriculum and how things will run. And it's not that I didn't see them, I did, and I've passed them along, but they're just not feasible to be answered right now until we know all the details. So I just don't want anyone to think that, I'm ignoring them or skipping over that, but it's just something that we don't have the answer to yet until we know all the details.
Yeah, it sounds like we'll need to come back here again in the near future, which is quite all right. Sarah Driscoll, do you have any thoughts from your end?
Just a few. Something that I got a lot of, which may not seem super important, but a lot of elementary age kids and parents really look forward to that August 1st, who's my teacher, and building on that excitement. Is that still the plan to release teachers, or is that going to get pushed back?
Great question. We know there's always a lot of excitement around that, and it's been waiting either on the portal at midnight, or I don't think anyone waits by their mailbox anymore for those letters. But unfortunately, working through the hybrid and the virtual, we are going to have to push those dates back. Using the timeline shared by Superintendent Provenzano, probably that third week in August right now seems reasonable for us. And that's really so that we can ensure that we are reducing the density impact.
Can't hear you guys.
Is your light on?
I think I'm on, this is the third mic, so hopefully the third one's smart.
Can't hear you.
Okay, let's go with mic number 4. I think this one's going to be the lucky one. But I'll just rephrase what I had shared, that unfortunately, we are not going to be able to share out class placements by August 1st. We are looking to push those back probably until the third week in August. And that's mainly so that we can make sure that classes are balanced appropriately. We want to make sure that we're looking at having approximately 12 students in the classroom. We want to have a clear understanding of how many students are going to be participating in the hybrid option. And certainly, we would never want to disappoint a student or a family by first announcing one placement and then having to make a change a few weeks later. So those are really our reasons for holding.
Thank you very much. My next question is, what sort of training have the teachers been receiving? There was a lot of inconsistency in the learning during the spring, and I know we were in crisis mode, and I applaud our administration and our teachers, and I know they were really doing the best they can. I know I had a teacher that was a little tech challenged, which she admitted profusely, but yet made connections with students. But is there been more training, and are there going to be more protocols put in place to make sure that students across the board, across the district, are getting more of a cohesive experience?
So let me start with a couple of reasons that we've identified for engagement and accountability. One of the things that we were very conscious of going out in a very reactive phase, because it took place so quickly, out of school March 16th with roughly 2 days to prepare, is a concerted effort by the state to not hold kids accountable for potentially, impact of COVID in their families. Parents being essential workers and things like that. So you saw most districts in the state really struggling with the concept of grading and accountability for students. And I think that impacted motivation to a degree and engagement. And I think that, again, having had the opportunity for an entire summer to prepare for that, you're going to see much more rigid guidelines in that regard. Again, having the opportunity to plan effectively, having all of our teachers on the Google Classroom platform, providing training for teachers to make that leap. As you said, that teacher that might not be as tech savvy, there's been a number of different professional development opportunities to get those teachers on board, to make sure we've identified everyone that didn't have one, to make sure we help them make that transition. So there's a number of things regarding grading policies, attendance policies, professional development, et cetera, that we've been working on throughout the summer to make that a better experience for everybody.
And Sarah, I would just add too that there's been a lot of work done to really standardize the virtual experience across 4 elementary buildings and across classrooms within buildings as well, and a real focus on how are we incorporating our reading and math specialists, how are we incorporating specials, how are we providing therapies that students need virtually, what's the amount of time that each classroom will be live with their teacher, possibly in a whole group setting, and then what will the small group or independent work times be. So I think families can feel very confident that there's going to be a lot more standardization across the buildings and very clear expectations of what the virtual programming will look like.
There were some pearls, and part of the pearls were there was high levels of curriculum alignment. You saw that more than ever in the K-5 arena, where there were weekly or bi-weekly updates and information to teachers to impart, a guaranteed curriculum throughout the K-5 arena, and we're looking forward to building upon that. All teachers will also have or will be using the Google platform, and this will again ensure that no matter which classroom that they're in or which class they're taking, that they'll have access to that consistent platform, sharing information, communicating with families, and using the modalities that are attached to the Google suite. So I'm looking forward to seeing it evolve, and I know that was the number one priority as we've moved into this, was the one certainty that we were looking to improve, and I think that we have the right plan moving forward.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing those thoughts, and I think it will bring a lot of comfort to parents knowing that that's definitely been something that's been looked at. For children I received a lot of questions around special education and special needs kids. And I know, Brett, you mentioned last night that your goal is to get those kids in the building as many days as possible. Could you speak a little bit more to that? Like I don't know, I don't want to get this wrong, but which kids you're looking at getting in 4 to 5 days a week?
Yeah, go for it. No, please. Yep.
Sure, I can share at the elementary level, and then I'll have Pat and Bob weigh in as well with the secondary level. But at the elementary level right now, we are discussing having students who participate in our 813 program, as well as our 1211 programs or our 1211 LEAP programs coming into the building 5 days a week for instruction. And then we're working through plans right now for students that receive consultant teacher direct services and resource room. So the days that they are in school in person, those services would be delivered in person, and then we would transfer those services to a virtual model on the days that students are home.
Excuse me, and like Aaron said, like, we'd be trying to do the same thing. You know, Martha Brown has a 1211 program that they'd be trying to bring in every day. I know in our consultant kids, same thing, we want to make sure they're getting that resource in person, but then on the days they're not in school, also making sure we're meeting their needs and finding out what they're missing in class, or what they think they would have been missing in class, so they can make sure they're staying up to speed and getting the help they need. We've also talked about, when we have some group counseling and some of those related services, finding ways to make sure those kids, that's done at school, to make sure they're not missing out on any of that they're needed, that's on their IEPs.
Yeah, and I don't have a ton to add to that, except to say that our Director of Special Education, Mr. DeRozier, and all of the administrators responsible for special education services are really trying to align the continuum of services for our students in most need, which, you know, Aaron and Pat already commented on, which we'll try to have in the building, you know, daily, and then kind of graduate that back to the, you know, the general education student that's in the building 2 days a week. So there'll be some level of in-between for students with resource room and the ICT model, the integrated co-teaching model, to make sure that they have a level of support, reteaching, pre-teaching concepts to reinforce, you know, the parts of their IEPs that call for that. And I know I apologize, you know, I've seen people ask the question, what is that? Their individual education plan, for everybody that's listening.
As we move through the process, the communication will be coming from our Office of Special Education, so families have direct contact with Mr. DeRozier's. And if you have particular questions, by all means, reach out, either the information or the site that I've been sharing up here. If there's a special ed question, we can get it directly to Mr. DeRozier's, and he'll be very interested to get back to you. We also know that we have students who are new to our country, who definitely need services on a daily basis as well. So we'll be reaching out to those families for our English language learners to experience school on a daily basis, as per the guidance says that we should do, and that we are honored to do, to help and support those students and families as we transition back. And I know that there's been talk about our alternative ed program at the high school.
Yeah, again, I would say that, you know, any students that we feel are at risk, and with regards to alternative education, students that are in credit recovery and trying to find a different pathway towards graduation, again, the concerted effort made by high school administrators in working in conjunction with our, you know, our district representatives to ensure that those pathways are maintained, and our students can recover the credits that they need to graduate either with their cohort or shortly thereafter. We have a very successful alternate education program in-house that we do. It's a bit of, I hate to use the word again, but hybrid, where we try to include those students in a regular instruction day and then after school as well. So we're working out of the box to maintain those options and make sure that we can service those students.
So there's also questions out there about, you know, what's going to be our expectations and standards around masking and 6 feet. And you know, 6 feet in masking is the standard. And we also know that there'll be further guidance coming out to substantiate that, to eliminate any ambiguity. There should be guidance coming very soon that says that you must be 6 feet and masked, not or. We could maybe talk a little about what mask breaks might look like in each individual area. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you've thought about that. There will be times and opportunities for students to take intentional mask breaks and using our spaces and making sure that we're following the guidance, but you know, that will be our expectation.
Yeah, definitely, and that's part of the planning right now too, is finding where that space could be for the kids to take their masks off, either staying separate from each other to make sure it's safe. We've talked about outside, we've talked about the gyms, we've talked about the cafeterias when lunches aren't happening, in the WENs. You know, we're trying to work on a plan, along with everybody else in each building. They're all a little bit different when we talk about one-way flow, traffic flow, and ins and outs of the building. And although they may look different in different spots, we're absolutely going to have it ready and going from there, because we know they're not going to want to sit in this all day long.
Sure, same at the elementary level. We know that's of high importance, and I think especially on those nice weather days where you're going to be looking to get students outside as much as possible, using all the different spaces around our buildings, whether that's structured walks, whether it's recess, whether it's just, time to go outside to take a break. That's certainly a high importance area for us.
Yeah, I really have much to add in that regard, except to say that, high school students' schedules are filled with intentional breaks, and we expect that as most of them are transitioning as adults, they're pretty good about advocating for themselves, and, there'll be those periods where they're outside with PE, with our seniors, the opportunity to, to have senior privilege and to be in their own environments, so I think they'll take advantage of that.
Dr. Cook, I'm going to call you out of the bullpen a little bit and talk about, the science on masking, the science on distancing, what we know from a scientific perspective. Because again, from day one, I've been speaking about the guidance, the best practices, the research. That needs to guide our practice. It can't be wrapped up in thoughts and opinions.
Exactly, Brett. I appreciate you reemphasizing that focus, because the science is pretty clear that masks have very protective values, whether it's a cloth mask, a surgical mask, an N95 mask. Masks don't have harms or risks associated with them. That's been well proven. The American Lung Association, the CDC, major medical associations have documented that. I've worked with physicians, nurses, surgeons in the OR wearing masks continuously for 8, 9, 10-hour procedures. So the safety of masks is pretty clear. Now, the fact is that some people have made some homemade facial coverings that, would not be safe because of an overabundance of trying to be protective and using things that aren't recommended. So there's always the one case. But the reality is that this is a virus that at the beginning we felt was, it appeared to only be a contact respiratory droplet type of pathogen. And as time and more information emerges, we discover it does pass in an aerosolized manner in the air. It's not passed or as viable or as contagious as something like measles, but it's not inconsequential. So it is something that needs to be looked at. The way we define contacts really kind of ties this all together. So it's being within a close proximity, 6 feet or less, with versus without a mask, and for what period of time. And so 15 minutes can be considered a contact. So that's why if we can mitigate any of those factors, then you reduce, you reduce the risk of, people being identified as being contacted or exposed. So we know that, 1 foot is high risk because of exposure, 3 feet is a little less, 6 feet is a really where you get the biggest bang, and the further away after that, it's good, but 6 seems to be the distance. I know there's a lot of discussion around 3 feet, and it is something that is interesting to look at, but at the end of the day, the schools in New York State, we have to look at what is in front of us right now. And right now, it does not appear clear that 3 feet is considered an option within New York State. I'm not saying that it's not something to consider, because the American Academy of Pediatrics and other groups have suggested it's possible, and that might be possible actually in younger children who have less transmission, it appears. So there are ways, there are things to look at, but right now, if any school were to submit a plan that said 3 feet in it in New York State, given the specificity of these guidelines, that school probably runs a significant risk of being told, no, that plan doesn't work. So staying at 6, doing as many of these mitigating steps, hand washing, masking as much as possible, masking for teachers, staff, as well as students. All these things will reduce risk. And as time goes on and as we learn more, we may be able to, those guidance may change. I know there's, guidance from the beginning of this pandemic on testing and other things has changed, partly from a knowledge standpoint, also partly from a resource standpoint. So I don't know if it's clear to people, but at the very beginning of the pandemic, the concern of masking and face coverings was not a matter of are they effective or not. it was a tremendous shortage of that resource. And it's been described and acknowledged that the government didn't endorse this because of that concern, that there was already a paucity of this in the country when it was being needed to get to frontline providers. And so it was not advised to endorse that at that time. And now that there's a more adequate supply, then it's something that, you know, is acknowledged. So this isn't a matter of you know, it's not effective. This is a matter of, we know the evidence is there, it's safe. Hand washing is going to be really important. You know, we get the questions about, now that kids come back, are there going to be spikes in strep throat and other infections and things like that? Well, potentially, but that's the way it is every school year starts. We would hope, maybe we're being a little too optimistic on the pediatric side, that if we have a lot more routine behavior around hand washing and sanitizing and masking, maybe we don't see spikes in things like strep throats and other common infections. It won't go away entirely, but I don't anticipate, given these added mitigation factors, that we'll see a higher than expected amount of those. So I can pause there.
Great.
Unless there's something more specific I
No,
didn't cover.
no, thank you. I really appreciate that. And again, this wasn't something that we decided. This was something that was based upon the guidance and the research that we've had. And I think you said it perfectly. The documents that we're supposed to submit to the state require us to be true to that mandate, and it's a greater health concern that we're trying to navigate as well. Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Sure.
Sorry, we're sharing mics here for a second. I just had a quick question. I wanted to piggyback on that. I know it's a specific question, but I know it's a big question. And is there any guidance you can give to families in preparation for kids needing to wear masks when they do come to school? You know, kind of how it will be handled, you know, will they need it? Will they be provided in school? Things like that. You know, if they get dirty, can things be changed? You know, those type of questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Miles, can you please address that?
Sure. Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. So we are actually working with some of our staff members currently to create some videos on social distancing as well as mask wearing at age-appropriate levels. But I would just, as a parent, encourage you to begin practicing that. You know, I think really when we think about our little ones, they aim to please, and they're going to want to do what their peers do, generally. Yes, we're looking at a whole day, and we'll make sure that we have masking breaks throughout because we know that that will be a challenge for kids. But anything that you can start doing at home right now, every time you leave the house to go somewhere, that's sort of the expectation in society anyway. So be practicing that with them wearing them in the car, because that replicates the school bus, with them wearing them, you know, if they're going out to the playground, even just on the way, and then they can remove it when they're there in safe distance from other kids. If you go to the grocery store with them. So anytime that you're really going out of the house, it's an opportunity to practice wearing them. You can even practice wearing them for longer, you know, bouts of time at home, just try to get them used to that. You know, kids respond to reward systems, right? Little kids respond to reward systems. So if you need to kind of use a little behavior incentive and modification to help encourage them to keep the mask on for a longer period of time, I think that that's an effective way of doing that as well. But we are going to hopefully have some of these videos and things ready to share out to the community so that you can be working with your students at home prior to the return to school. So, yeah, I think if there's anything else anybody wants to add to that.
You know, I would add, young kids are really resilient, and they learn by example. And, you know, I'm always pleased to see, not that I, you know, try to go out too often, but when I'm out and I see parents walking, holding hands with their kid in the store, and come on, buddy, time to put on your mask, and the kids do, and they walk around and do well. And so you're right, it's getting it into a routine and a habit. I have a niece and a nephew who go to a daycare, and they'll wear a mask most of the day. You know, we are looking at what are the options for relief around that. I mean, I don't anticipate it to be worn the entire time, but the reality is, there are ways to do this and encourage this, and teachers are here to teach our children to read, to write, and to keep themselves safe and healthy and help keep others safe and healthy, and that's part of it. The special ed community in the Rochester area has also developed some videos and materials around this. I know a number of individuals who are running programs for kids with developmental disabilities, some kids with, autism spectrum and other texture issues, and work with those kids to wear masks. And, it doesn't happen the first time, but, it's part of the approach. And with time, these kids get used to them more and more. So I don't underestimate the kids' ability to fall in line with, and to be on board with this. And we have to admit this is extremely important for the health of everyone else around them.
And yes, thank you, Dr. Cook and Deb Miles, Director of Student Services.
Mr. Provenzano,
we-
the only
we-
other thing I would add to that, Dr. Cook, thank you for reminding me. Our occupational therapist will certainly be working with those students as well who have sensory, dysregulation around different textures and things and having something on their face. But just as a general rule, I would just, recommend to parents, we always sort of have to remind ourselves, I'm a parent, at home, I kind of speak freely. So kids are impressionable, right? So we just have to remind ourselves where we're having our conversations and what our own nervousness and anxiety might be around some of these things, and making sure that we're not necessarily sharing that in front of our children so that they don't take on those same feelings unnecessarily.
Thank you. And the district will be supplying masks. We work with a common vendor with Monroe County Schools and coordinate efforts. So there will be masks on hand, and I know that families also have masks that they'll be bringing in, and you'll see all sorts of, I know there's booster clubs selling masks and donating to, our local food shelf to help those initiatives, and I'm sure that our schools will be doing the same. So masks will be in vogue and plentiful. And they will be provided by the school.
Can you speak a little bit to curriculum for the elementary age children, especially our K-1-2? It has been play-based, where they are working in groups, they're playing together. How is that going to look this year? Are they still going to be allowed to get into small groupings and have that free play time?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the academic needs, curriculum management, and ed programming is our priority. I'm buying a little time for Dr. Karen Finger, our principal from Dudley School, to come forward and share her thoughts on that question.
Can you hear me? So thanks. Obviously, that has been a huge concern of ours right along. We've certainly recognized the developmental needs of young children. We're hopeful that with reducing the number of kids in the classroom, we're still going to be able to have, a strong play component to educating them. Rather than working in close proximity to their peers, it's probably going to be spread out 6 feet, a little bit different. They're going to have their own manipulatives instead of sharing community manipulatives. Those are all of the considerations that we're making as we continue to plan.
Thank you very much. I think you kind of answered this based on the manipulatives, but will all supplies be kept individual instead of sharing?
Yes, absolutely. And to that, we're certainly looking towards having to make some accommodations to our supply lists.
For all the grades, do you anticipate that the supplies that they use at school will be able to come home, or should parents be buying 2 sets of supplies?
Honestly, we hadn't thought about that yet, but certainly that is a great question and something that I think we'll have to work together to come up with a viable solution. I wouldn't expect families to have to buy 2 sets. I think we'll come up with some way of being able to either have supplies, that are provided to you for keeping at home, but also having them for each child in the school.
Thank you so much. In the spring, sorry, I'll go ahead and let you.
I was just going to comment, the guidance is that, again, at our level, whether it be calculators, measuring instruments in science, et cetera, that materials are not shared. So I wouldn't anticipate they need 2 sets. Anything that they would have on their own, colored pencils, protractor, that kind of thing, really should be theirs in their bag, used by them. As a parent, myself of 3 teenagers, my advice would be you don't share with a friend, so that you don't need to have multiple sets of things like that.
I have 2 more questions that came up a lot, so I just want to quick get to those. In the spring, a lot of the materials came to us where parents had to print things off. Because there's going to be days in between, will packets be sent home from school to kind of take that off the parents from having to print so much, especially when there's multiple kids in a household?
Yes, that is absolutely our plan. In addition to that, all of our teachers are going to be using Google Classroom. So it's going to be a much cleaner remote access.
Thank you. My last question is, what are you envisioning around transportation, especially as you are encouraging parents to drop off and pick up? I know at the elementary level, due to security reasons, we've usually entered the building, shown ID, signed out. What is that going to look like?
One of the things that we're really excited about is looking into changing our dismissal process especially, and having parents that are going to be regular pickups utilizing a tag that would hang from their mirror in their car, so that as they pull up, we know it's going to have a number or whatever on it, so that we can know which child needs to then go out to that car. It's going to obviously take more manpower to do this, but it will expedite the process and also keep people from having to enter into the building. Anything else?
Sure, and I was just going to quickly add, I think that's a great question, and it's certainly something that we're considering. Any parents that have ever picked up, I'll just say at Northside and Dudley, know at arrival and dismissal, we're looking, moving, close to 1,300 children in and out of school. So both of those, arrival and dismissal, are going to take some reimagining, again, so that we can reduce density, so that we can social distance. And those are guidelines that all 4 buildings are working on, so that there's some consistency, and we look forward to sharing those out with parents.
Brett, one last question for you, just to clarify. I know you tried to touch on it earlier. For planning purposes, is it going to be that 3rd week in August when parents are going to be finding out which days their families are in school, or do you anticipate being able to get that out sooner?
I'd like to hopefully settle on a plan by the end of next week, and then very soon thereafter, the following week, confirm with the planners, our building principals, how we will determine who comes which day. So that would be, what's that, the first week in August? So you can plan accordingly, because again, being in the child care need business at points in my life, I understand that having that at the forefront sooner than later is always best.
Karen, last question. Can you talk about specifically what your plan is around kindergartners, as this is their first experience in school? I know for 6 years I was a bus buddy and first day friends, holding hands, walking kids to classrooms, giving that hug. So what do you envision that now looking like? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. It's a work in progress right now. We're trying to figure that out, because we certainly want to make it as warm and friendly as we possibly can, but we have to take these safety precautions very seriously. So it's going to look different, but to the greatest extent possible, we're going to keep the very child-centered feel to what we do. We need to. We have to. We'll find a way.
Thank you so much. I knew that would be your answer. I know I have a ton, just like Kelly said, we received so much feedback from parents, which just amazes me. I'm so grateful at how involved you're getting and advocating for your kids. Brett, I would love to do another one of these in a couple of weeks. Kelly and I have created Google Docs. All of these questions have been forwarded to Brett. So he's aware of anything that we maybe didn't get to and that we missed, and I promise we're going to get to it in the future.
It's 8:00, and I do know for certain that we will be coming back to this platform as we continue to learn more. There are frequently asked questions that are being developed. Like I said earlier, we knew that we weren't going to be able to get to all of them. We'll do our best to put those and frame those as we move along, so we could continue to understand what's on our families' minds. And we appreciate everybody's patience. And I know these are uncertain times. I know we all want our children back to school, but we want to do it in the best, most healthy way to support not only our children, but our staff and greater community. For now, I'm going to be signing off, and I appreciate everybody's participation. I'm grateful for our esteemed guests here, and our administrators and board members, and staff members and families alike that are interested in bringing our schools back and doing it in the best way that we know how. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to future communications and platforms. Thank you for the tech team for bringing this this town hall to life, and it seemed like it was a pretty seamless night. So thank you.
Take care.